In the early hours of New Year's Eve 2019, an eastward moving firestorm swept through Mogo State Forest on the New South Wales South Coast. It leapt across a 100-metre wide firebreak and ripped through the village of Mogo, destroying many homes and businesses. I decided to find out if any wildlife had survived the firestorm. From mid-2019, I'd been trying to compile intimate footage of the lives of lyrebirds, the world's largest songbird and best mimic. I'd had some success by placing a camera trap on a male lyrebird's display mound just north of Mogo, but I'd failed to get what I really wanted: video of the male lyrebird singing and performing his mating dance on the mound he'd cleared on the forest floor. The bush had become so dry through the winter and into spring, there was little food, so no mating or breeding took place. The track near which I'd set up my motion sensing wildlife camera used to look like this. After the fire, the scene had utterly changed. I couldn't drive all the way in because there were trees down across the track, so I had to hoof it for the last couple of 100 metres. Before the fire, my male lyrebird's mound was set within a stand of native grasses, saplings, burrowangs and creepers, and he maintained it carefully, clearing it of fallen leaves, sticks and bark. At night, the mound was visited by the swamp wallabies that camped nearby, and a big old brush-tailed possum who lived in a tree hollow a few metres away. After the fire, I couldn't see much hope for the lyrebirds. If the lyrebirds that lived here survived the fire, they'll starve to death. They eat invertebrates that are found in the moist litter on the forest floor, things like millipedes and slaters and worms and grasshoppers, anything that they can find. But already the drought had dried out all the leaf litter here and they were really scratching for a living. And now, of course, there's no leaf litter left at all, and there won't be a deep, rich, moist humus here for many years to come. I set up the camera and left an offering of sweet potato and carrots on the mound, nutritious, life-sustaining food containing plenty of moisture. After a brief shower of rain, there was already a little standing water available nearby. Amazingly, the local swamp wallabies had survived and had returned to their former home base, even though it was now completely denuded of the undergrowth they prefer for concealment. They didn't have a choice. The completely burned out area stretched for about 20 kilometres south of this point, 120 kilometres north, 10 kilometres east as far as the southern suburbs of Bateman's Bay, and 40 kilometres west, right over the Budawang Range. Based on individual characteristics, like coat colour, ear damage and scars, I reckon I can identify at least 5 individuals, 2 males and 3 females. One night there was a bit of a sensation when a younger subordinate male thought he could snitch a carrot when the boss wallaby turned his back. There was a robust exchange of views, and after that I distributed the relief supplies over a larger area to give everybody a chance to eat simultaneously. The old possum, unfortunately, had fallen victim to the fire. I found his remains, picked clean by ants, a few metres from where I'd caught him on camera 6 months earlier. He couldn't outrun the fire or outclimb it. Had it been less intense, he might have survived, hunkered down in his tree hollow, but that wasn't to be. Three weeks after the inferno, the bush was tentatively starting its recovery. Grass shoots were emerging and eucalypts were sprouting new growth. Old man Banksias had showered their winged seeds on the ground from woody seed pods that split open in the heat of the fire. These guys actually need fire to reproduce. And there was something I hadn't seen before. Tiny baby skinks scurried everywhere on the ground. Certainly these ones had hatched from clusters of eggs safely secreted in holes in the soil before the fire. They provide food for a range of birds like kookaburras, butcherbirds and kingfishers that may have survived. There were casual sightings of other survivors. A goanna crossed the road in front of me. Wedge-tailed eagles soared overhead, and I spotted a black-tailed kite and a square-tailed kite. Both of these raptor species make use of fire to hunt injured or exposed prey. And I came across a swamp wallaby cooling off in a pool of water on another track a kilometre west of my original study site. This prompted me to set up a second feeding station near the pool, and I moved the camera there for a few nights. Strangely, wallabies never appeared on the downloads, but a fine-looking wombat showed up one night. No doubt he'd survived easily down a deep burrow. Wombats are supposed to kill for carrots, but this one rejected my offering in favour of the tiny grass shoots that were beginning to emerge. The big surprise was the appearance of bowerbirds. With their strong bills, they were able to rip chunks out of sweet potatoes, and they didn't mind birdseed and dog kibble either. I had added these to the offerings in the hope they'd attract native rodents or carnivores like quolls, dingoes or feral cats, but over 12 nights recording, none of these showed up. A couple of ravens appeared once, but they weren't much interested in what was on offer. Back at the Lyrebird mound site, the swamp wallabies were tucking into a solid diet of carrot and sweet potato, but they were now being bothered by hordes of tiny mosquitoes. 2 whole troops of bowerbirds appeared, and they weren't intimidated by the wallabies. I'd added some overripe strawberries to the offering, and these were a big hit. The dominant male leaders of the 2 troops battled it out for access. Clearly, bowerbirds are robust territorial survivors. One night, after a wallaby had triggered the camera, it incidentally recorded, for a fraction of a second, a passing microbat. With scorching weather expected and the puddles left by the earlier shower drying up or turning fetid, I decided to install a couple of watering points near the feeding stations, and I placed food next to them to ensure they'd be found. The wallabies quickly located the water but never drank. Apparently they got all the moisture they needed from the carrots and sweet potato. The bowerbirds, however, pugnaciously claimed this new resource as their own. In this sequence, the bowerbird has no objection to a smaller bird, a very battered-looking yellow robin, visiting the water, but a thirsty, noisy Friarbird is aggressively driven away. After the ruckus, the yellow robin sneaks back for a drink. Out in the burned bush, I've recorded very few species, and those that I have survived for very specific reasons. The wallabies can outrun a fire, the wombats can shelter in their burrows, the bowerbirds fly fast and escape over the fire front, the skinks were unhatched in eggs buried in the soil. But hundreds of species have no defence against a hot crown fire spreading rapidly along a front tens or hundreds of kilometres long. Things like the dozens and dozens of small foliage birds, the ground-living birds, native rodents, antechinus's, possums, gliding possums and insectivorous microbats. These will survive only with really exceptional luck. With fires of massive extent, taking out half of all the native forest and woodland on the east coast, for the few survivors, unburned bush will be extremely difficult to reach. And if they do, they'll find it drought-ravaged and severely depleted of food. In some form, the bush will survive, because it's evolved over millions of years with fire, but it will take many years, perhaps decades, before a full range of the mammals, birds, reptiles and invertebrates recolonise it. On Australia's east coast, the megafires, coming on top of years of drought, have torn apart the web of life.